Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Catherine Batista with the Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you all to our June practice sharing session. Before we get started with the webinar, I'm just going to quickly read our antitrust statement. So we want to advise all participants that these meetings and all activities related to the Electric Utility Industry Sustainable Supply Chain Alliance are subject to compliance with all federal and state antitrust laws. We will not discuss any company-specific pricing, vendor terms and conditions, discounts, or anything else that may affect prices, allocation of markets, specific vendor experiences, or any other competitively sensitive information. All right, so just a reminder, you're all muted today. So if you do have any questions, please type them into the chat box and I will make sure that they get to Sam. So with that, I'll introduce our speaker. We're going to be hearing from one of our members today, Sam Kuchizula, who's from Salt River Project. He's going to be presenting on SRP's sustainability vision, their journey, and their 2035 goals. So take it away, Sam.
Thanks, Catherine. Appreciate that. So thanks everybody for the opportunity to share our 2035 process and some of our vision that we're working on. I'm actually a member of the purchasing organization as well as responsible for coordinating the sustainability efforts for our corporate operations services organization. And this includes transportation, facilities, investment recovery, and purchasing. And the key areas that I think most of you that know me know, I'm coordinating. We have a great team of leaders and team members in each of these areas who are all dedicated to this effort, as well as a corporate sustainability team that has helped walk us through this process. Next slide, please. So here's our conversation outline. We've really just begun this journey. Again, it's 2035, so we do have another 17 years to work on this. I'd like to share our implementation strategy and some of our structure that we've been involved with the sustainability movement. We've been working on sustainability for many, many years. We've got lots of wins under our belt. This effort really helps us structure aggressive goals for the future, and others will continue to help us mature as we move through this process. So we're going to be talking about origins and operations, embracing sustainability, our movement, guiding principles, team structure, our framework and action plan. That's sort of our outline of what we're working on. And I added a couple of key accomplishments, but really I just want to make sure everyone understood this is really just talking about the framework for our plan. This isn't necessarily an accomplishments presentation, although I did add some of that into this so we can see what we've done over the last couple of years. Next slide. So this is kind of our founding, because a lot of people don't understand SRP, and I'm not going to go through each one of these lines. I just really wanted to highlight a couple of them. So we've been around, and our beginnings go back to 1902 and 1903. Key date is 1903, when the ranchers and farmers actually in Arizona pledged their land as collateral to obtain a loan to build the Roosevelt Dam. And that's really where we got our start. And there's a picture of a badge on there, an old badge, and then of course you can see the picture of the dam in the background. One of our other key dates is, let's see, 1952 and 54. It's when we first built our power plant, 3 of them. Steam generating stations in the Phoenix metro area. And also we started to see a lot of expansion in 1956 through 1969, where we went from 2 miles of distribution lines all the way to 403. And I'm sure that many other municipalities and cities had the same expansion in those time frames. Our first formal environmental study was actually completed in 1969 for our Navajo generating station. That's our supercritical large coal site that's actually up on by the Indian Reservation in Page, Arizona. Some of you may have seen some press on that plant. That plant's actually scheduled to close at the end of 2019. And of course, in October 2017, our 2035 goals were approved by the board of directors, and there was a lot of effort from our corporate sustainability team and our sub-teams such as corporate operations services to to make that happen. So that was a lot of work for our board to get prepared for our board. Okay, next slide. So our operations today, 1 million customers, 1 million water, 1 million power customers. We have around 5,100 employees, 3,000 square miles of electric service area, 375 miles of water service area. I'm going to skip around here. So 750,000 of acre feet of water deliveries. Water is a key factor. We live in a desert here in Arizona, so we have our eye on the ball there. And 1.5 megawatts in power, was 16% of that as renewable energy. Next slide. So what is sustainability for SRP? We've made great strides over the years. In mid-2017 is really when we began the process of kicking off this effort. And I'm sure that it was before then, but that's when some of the teams that were pulled into this to help our corporate sustainability team make this happen. Effective of implementation of our 2035 process is really going to help us with our winning proposition, and you'll see this throughout the presentation. Our winning proposition is to be leaner, greener, and even more customer-centric. We're embracing this opportunity to define greener, capture business value, align direction, address any expectations, and this will also allow us some room to refinement over time. So we have a long journey ahead of us. Next slide. So why 2035 goals? And again, this is the being leaner, greener, and even more customer-centric. What this allowed us to do is to an opportunity to define what greener is. We're capturing the business value. We're working with all of our departments to align our direction, and of course address customer and stakeholder expectations. And again, we have the allow our growth and refinement over time. Next slide. So what this means for us as well is it's striking the right balance. So a lot of sustainability has economic and social factors in addition to environmental factors. Striking the right balance has helped point SRP in the focus of the following key areas. Next slide. So as we're looking at this pillars, we have 5 key sustainability categories: carbon emission reductions, water resiliency, supply chain and waste minimization, and grid modernization, and customer and community and employee engagement. So when we started defining sustainability and looking at our 2035 effort, we wanted to categorize so that we could get different departments and teams to work on goals for these different areas. And so that's really how we began this process, is defining the categories and then moving down towards the goals. So for carbon emissions, I'll just highlight a couple of these. It means steadily and meaningfully decreasing SRP-related carbon emissions intensity over the time from generation resources, operations, transportation, and other initiatives. Just taking a look at that one, you can see that carbon emissions, when you think about power companies, you think about generation. Well, we have other areas that have an effect and impact on carbon emissions, such as the energy that we actually consume, and also our transportation fleet for our services and also our employees that are driving SRP vehicles. So that's kind of how some of this can tie together. For water resiliency, it's maintaining a safe and reliable and resilient water supply throughout our service territory through conservation and augmentation. So water, again, it's not just about the water that our power plants use, it's also about the water that we consume in our buildings, and through any other efforts. It's also, since we maintain the water network here in Arizona, it's about storing water underground. We have some unique ways to store acres and millions of acres of water, not only in reservoirs, but we're doing that underground. So there's just a couple examples that I wanted to highlight for these different categories. The next slide. So here's where we get into our guiding principles. For instance, reducing the carbon footprint. It's reducing the amount of CO2 emitted per megawatt by 33%. And you're going to see as I go through some of these principles and goals that they're very aggressive when you think about goals and setting them for a company. Some folks might want them to be more aggressive. Some folks might wonder how these goals will be achieved. Another one for reducing our carbon footprint is reducing the CO2 from our offices and fleet, and that's what I had mentioned earlier, by 30%. So we're going to take a look at that. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in a little bit. Ensuring water resiliency, reducing our water use at our facilities by 45%. That's almost in half. So that's a very aggressive goal. We've already had water savings and made some achievements in reducing water at our non-generation, our facilities that we work in. So that's going to be a very, very tough goal, but we'll continue to work on that. And now supply chain and waste minimization. So we're working right now on incorporating sustainability criteria into our decision making. And the goal is to hit 80% by 2035. That is really a challenge. So what does incorporate sustainability into our decision making? It means asking the questions and factoring in sustainability, whether that be through surveys, whether that be through the SRM supplier relationship management process. There's all different ways of doing that. One of the things that we're looking at to start out small right now is to just ask a series of questions, include them with our RFPs. And when we get the results back from those questions, then we can incorporate that into our grading criteria when we're choosing the supplier. And that's really a great start at moving this direction. We also have a huge landfill avoidance of 95% of operational waste and 50% of our standard office waste. So 95, that's just huge, but we've already made a lot of, and you're going to see in the accomplishments, we've made some key movement in that area with our investment recovery group. They've really done a fantastic job at identifying how to focus or how to move different waste streams into either reuse or for recycling, as well as our office waste. We have recycling efforts underway to separate out recyclable materials and partner with our community for how to dispose of them in a responsible manner. Next slide. So with our grid modernization, so delivering a smarter grid that it's going to enable the adoption of new technology and optimize our resources, SRP's resources. And that can be anything from redundancy to lowering the amount of equipment that's needed in different areas, as well as upgrading equipment where it makes sense. So there's a lot of work that's being done in that area. I'm really not the expert, but we do have a great team that's working on looking at that specific goal. And then engaging with our communities. So we want to achieve at least an 80% of our customers who achieve at least 80% of our customers who give SRP a positive rating for its sustainability efforts. That's not just for customer satisfaction rating, that's customer satisfaction for our sustainability efforts. So really, that's a very that's going to be a very difficult goal. Our community already embraces and knows that SRP works on these things. 80% will reach it though. And also grow our employee engagement with SRP sustainability programs and volunteer efforts. So we have a green team, for instance, where there's a whole bunch of people from SRP that's engaged on this team. And really, it's just an engine for churning out ideas for sustainability. And it's a great grassroots effort that's going to help SRP be successful in some of these key areas. And you're going to get a copy of this presentation as well. But this is, we actually have an external website that covers our 2035 goals. And we have more goals to be put into detail that have more detail behind some of these goals. I just wanted to kind of highlight them today for this presentation, since we really only got about 20 minutes. So when you look at some of these goals, You can see that they're very aggressive. For instance, you might be thinking, how does an organization reduce non-generation water by 45%? And this is kind of a depiction of our team climbing Mount Everest. And this is a slide that we've used with several presentations. It really helps resonate with the different groups that are helping us do this effort, that we're going to achieve results by making incremental improvements. So in order to do this, we need a strong governance team and communication process, and that kind of melds in with our 2035 effort and what we've structured at SRP to make that happen. Next slide. So here's a look at our 2035 structure for our, all the way down from our leadership to our work teams. So first, we start with our core implementation team, and I've mentioned them before. They do a wonderful job, and they've really helped support this entire effort to make sure that everyone's on track and that we have information and tools necessary to be successful. So big shout out to them. That's really corporate sustainability. I think it's a member of about 10 members in that team that we meet with. There's a project manager and lots of support from leadership for that team. Where that support comes from is we have a governance committee. That's really our senior leadership that meet with our corporate sustainability team just to recap where we're at with the process, what type of communication we're structuring to present to our board of directors, different things like that. So our senior leadership are really helping in that area. And then our oversight committee, this is also senior leadership, sort of at the director level if you're keeping track of what type of people are in these meetings. And really they're our organization liaisons. So they're the folks that take the information and help work with the department teams to set the goals. And I'm gonna go through some key areas for our framework here in a second. Set the goals, work with the teams to make things happen. So very helpful. This four-tiered approach has been successful at helping us get this plan in place. Next slide. So looking at our framework, we really have 6 different key areas. We started with defining our scope, defining our vision, establishing our baselines, documenting highlights. So those are key wins that we've seen in our previous fiscal years, things that we want to just to make sure that we're documenting the efforts that we've already accomplished, as well as setting priorities for the future, looking at what are those key projects and activities that we can work on we want to set our sights on for the next couple of years. This is really a 2 to 3 year plan is our first increment of time we're looking at. And then also a process for reporting progress all the way up to that senior leadership governance board to make sure everyone is in the loop from the top to the bottom. Next slide. And I wanted to show this slide because I thought it was a great visualization, and not everything fits into this model. There's really an evaluation trade-off, so that when you're looking at a strategy or identifying a key item for sustainability, it could be a program that you'd like to implement. It could be something that you're looking at purchases, such as low flow water features or LED lighting, any of those type of efforts. There's an evaluation that you need to look at. And what that involves is you're looking at your strategic goals. What's your value measurements? So that could be anything from time savings to cost savings to whatever value what you would accomplish from working on that activity. There may or may not be a risk matrix or a risk factor involved with that decision, as well as financial parameters. Okay, it's going to cost me this much, but my value measure is this much. Put all those in the bucket together and take a look and then spit out your value function. And I know that's a simplified version, but I think this visualization, it should resonate with you that you need to go through an evaluation process and a payback period for these efforts to make sure they're the right thing for your organization. Next slide. So here's some samples of an action plan, and I put a couple things in here that we had for our facilities and transportation area, just to give you guys a good idea of what we're working on. So our scope is we decided and we met as a team, and it's including all vehicles that are owned and leased, and also all non-generation valley properties. So for water usage and CO2 usage, CO2, that's the type of scope that we identified for those different areas. And one of the lessons learned is the teams went through a process and they said, well, okay, so we're going to calculate our baseline. That must be kilowatt usage, right? Well, it is kilowatt usage, but really the environment, what we're looking at is what is the CO2 usage from those kilowatts that are used? And we have a calculation that we've put together for that. For our fuel usage in miles driven, what is the CO2 output? It's not about how much fuel you use, although you don't, I mean, that equates into CO2, but it's really about getting to a calculation to what your CO2 output is. And that was a key lesson that we walked through with the team. Some examples, some highlights, FY17, we achieved LEED certification for our PAB betterments, and that was our headquarters. PAB building is our power administration building. So we're going through a huge renovation there, and it's continuing over the next couple of years. Also FY18, one of the highlights from our transportation team. We've got other highlights. I just want to include a couple in here just to give you an example. We earned the Green Fleet and the Top 100 Fleet Award for SRP. So what are we working on? This is where we get to the priorities. We really need to improve our data collection process for both electricity and fuel consumption, as well as water. So, it's not easy when you have a bunch of facilities, as you guys probably are in the same situation, and gathering that water data from all those water municipalities where your buildings are located. That's a large effort. And yeah, you can go look at all the bills and gather it manually, but it really would be make it much easier if there's an automated way to do that. And that's what we're working on. Now, for our electricity, it's really self-reported because we're consuming our own electricity, but we do have all those numbers, so that's helping us gather those by facility. Looking at FY20, we're looking, we want to achieve a fleet goal of 100% of our sedans being either electric vehicles or quasi-electric vehicles, PHEV by 2021. So our transportation team has an aggressive goal, and every year they've been moving vehicles and purchasing vehicles to replace those other sedans. So lots of activity in that area. Next slide. For our, let's see, I think can you go on slide 16? There we go. So for investment recovery, 70% diversion for non-hazardous industrial solid waste. So you saw before, our goal is 95%. That's what I mentioned. Our team is doing a great job in that area, but we're continuing to look at different areas. For instance, we're on the wood recycling team for the EUISSCA organization, and we're looking at that as well. We've recycled 10,000 tons of mixed materials over the last 10 years, just to give you an idea of what we've worked on. Transportation area, we've reduced CO2 emissions last year by so many metric tons. Now, some of this isn't reported information, but again, I'm showing you the template for what you can use and the structure for your organization. Almost 50% of our on-road vehicles are currently using alternative fuels. We also have installed telematic pilot programs that are looking at driver behavior and idle time and things like that are key to see what opportunities we have to reduce some of those. And I think we're one of the most aggressive companies in the Phoenix area for installing charging stations for our employees for electric vehicles. Just over the last fiscal year, we've been charged 42 of them. And I know we have a lot more planned for the next couple of years. Next slide. For purchasing, we improved 11 of the 20 EUISSCA sustainability framework categories. So that's really a huge acknowledgement for our team. We've also are working on launching the new EUISSCA supplier survey. I mentioned the facility's lead recognition for the PAB betterments. We've also worked on high bay lighting fixtures, 450 of them over the last year, retrofitting them from the old ballasts that were up there. And then I mentioned we're working at refining our data, so we really need to work on that. So with that, go to the next slide, please. So this is just a great visual. I stole this picture from one of our sustainability representatives that presented this to me probably about a year ago. And this is, we really want, spread the word. It really set lofty goals, work with your companies to set goals. It really can happen as long as you're trying to focus on incremental improvements. This is an actual shipment that we received for some napkins. And as you can see, it came in a huge box that was surrounded by bubble wrap, and it was napkins. So there's still companies out there that just don't get it and really need us to help them with their sustainability efforts as well. And I think that's it. Questions?
Thanks, Sam. So,
sure.
Yeah, so we just have a couple of minutes here. I just want to remind everyone that if you do have any questions, please type them into the chat box because you are muted today. But just to kick it off, I guess how did your sustainability journey get started? What was the motivation or business value brought forth to senior leadership for setting these goals, and maybe how did you go about seeking their approval?
I think it was a perfect storm, a combination of a lot of great folks within our sustainability team, as well as interested in SRP in general, where we got this kicked off. And I know the senior leadership has been talking about this for a long time. So, I mean, as far as the exact start of it, I'm not sure. I can get that information, but I know that we have key members in our sustainability corporate team that have that kicked off the effort.
Okay, we just have one clarifying question that came in. What do you consider mixed materials?
Yeah, so non-hazardous industrial solid waste. So it's not office waste, and it's non-hazardous. So that includes everything from office materials to wood reels to chopped wire and all those different items. That's really the best way that I like to clarify it is it's non-office waste and non-hazardous.
Okay, thanks. And then just in the last couple of minutes here, I guess maybe you can just quickly touch on what do you think are your key success factors that will be critical in making these goals stick for SRP?
So it's not necessarily listed on here, and I tried to cover it. It's really up to the team. You can't have an overarching corporate sustainability team just achieve these goals. They really need the external team's help, and that's where the structure has really been key. Getting the team members, people assigned within a work team, within transportation, we have 6 people. Within facilities, we have 6 or 7 people. And it's not just one person in the area working on this. And also having that liaison that works with that team so that they can structure and work on the priorities that I mentioned, as well as helping them with incremental improvements. When you see that improvement, it helps fuel additional activities to helping us with our sustainability goals.
Thanks, Sam. So it looks like we don't have any further questions, but I just want to thank everyone for joining today, and thanks so much, Sam, for presenting. It's great to see the work that SRP has planned for the next few years. But just a reminder to everyone on the call, we're not going to be hosting a practice sharing webinar in the month of July, but we'll be back here on August 21st, where we're going to again be hearing from one of our members. So Craig Dykeman from Eversource is going to be talking about 2 initiatives. So one of which was a realist packaging initiative that resulted in a significant decrease in their wood waste. And the second is the design of a job-specific packaging initiative that will result in reduced cardboard packaging for LED lighting. So please be sure to sign up for that. You can do so on our website. But that's it for today. All members are now invited to dial into our member call, and we'll continue our conversation over there.
Thank you again.